Hey there! Grab yourself a coffee and enjoy the story. The autumn leaves crunched beneath Cordelia's feet as she swept them from the small pathway leading to her front door. Her hands ached with each movement. Arthritis, making itself known as the cold November air, settled into her bones. She paused, leaning on the broom to catch her breath, looking at the modest home she'd lived in for the past 15 years. The paint was peeling in places, and the gutter needed fixing, but it was home. The only one she could afford on her janitor's pension. A sharp wind made her shiver, reminding her that she needed to save on heating this month if she wanted to afford her heart medication. Cordelia Harlow, 72 years old, was about to discover the truth about the woman she trusted most. Cordelia noticed Larissa's sleek black car pulling into her driveway, right on time as always. She came 3 times a week to help with housework, cooking, and errands, a luxury Cordelia couldn't really afford, but one her daughter Lizzie insisted upon. Larissa stepped out, her expensive-looking coat fluttering in the breeze as she waved at Cordelia with a practiced smile. "Good morning, Cordelia. You shouldn't be out here sweeping in this cold," she called, hurrying toward the elderly woman with a grocery bag in hand. "I brought fresh ingredients for the Thanksgiving dinner tomorrow. Your daughter will be so impressed." Lizzie was flying in from London for Thanksgiving, the first visit in nearly 2 years. Cordelia's heart swelled with anticipation. Her beautiful, successful daughter had always been driven, ambitious. After college, her career in international finance had taken her across the globe, settling eventually in England. They spoke weekly on the phone, and Lizzie never failed to ask if her mother needed anything, always sending money, despite Cordelia's protests that she was managing just fine. "Let me take that," Larissa said, gently prying the broom from Cordelia's hands. "You should be resting. Did you take your medication this morning?" Cordelia nodded, following her inside. "Of course, though I'll need a refill soon. The copay went up again." She didn't mention that she'd been cutting her pills in half to make them last longer. Larissa's expression softened with concern. "Don't worry about that now. I'll handle it." She'd been with Cordelia for 3 years, hired by Lizzie after her mother had a minor fall. At first, Cordelia had resisted the help, proud and stubborn about maintaining her independence. But over time, Larissa had become indispensable, handling correspondence, managing bills, even taking Cordelia to doctor appointments. She knew everything about the elderly woman's life, perhaps too much, as would later be discovered. "I'm so excited about Lizzie coming," Cordelia said, settling into her worn armchair while Larissa began unpacking groceries in the kitchen. "It's been too long since I've seen her in person." "She's certainly been busy," Larissa remarked, her tone casual as she arranged items in the nearly empty refrigerator. "All those business trips, that promotion last year. It's amazing she found time to visit at all." There was something in her voice, a slight edge that Cordelia chose to ignore. Larissa had always been a bit odd about Lizzie, asking countless questions about her job, her salary, her life abroad. Cordelia had attributed it to natural curiosity. Later that evening, as Larissa prepared to leave, she handed Cordelia an envelope. "Your monthly statement from the bank. I've organized your bills for the month. You're a bit short again, but don't worry. I told the pharmacy they can wait until your next Social Security check for the balance on your heart medication." Cordelia took the envelope with a twinge of shame. Her financial situation had been deteriorating steadily, though she couldn't understand why. Her expenses were modest, and Lizzie sent money regularly. Somehow, it never seemed to be enough. The thought of asking her daughter for more made her stomach twist with embarrassment. "Thank you, Larissa. I don't know what I'd do without you." Larissa's smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "That's what I'm here for. I'll be back tomorrow morning to help prepare for Lizzie's arrival. We want everything to be perfect, don't we?" After she left, Cordelia sat at her small kitchen table and opened the bank statement. The numbers blurred before her tired eyes, but one thing was clear. She had less than $100 to last until the end of the month. Tears of frustration welled up. How had it come to this? She'd worked hard all her life, raised a wonderful daughter on her own after her husband died, saved every penny she could. Now, in her golden years, she was cutting pills in half and choosing between heat and food. The next morning dawned bright and clear. Thanksgiving Day. Cordelia woke early, excitement about Lizzie's visit making sleep impossible. She put on her best dress, a simple blue one she'd had for years, and even applied a touch of lipstick. Her fingers trembled slightly as she fastened her pearl earrings, a gift from Lizzie on her 70th birthday. Larissa arrived promptly at 9, bustling in with more groceries and a cheerful efficiency that filled Cordelia's quiet home with noise and movement. She set about preparing the turkey, while Cordelia polished the good silverware, the only thing of value she had left from her marriage. "Your daughter's flight landed on time," Larissa informed her, checking her phone. "She should be here in about an hour." The doorbell rang at precisely 11:30. Cordelia's heart leaped as she hurried to answer it, throwing open the door to find Lizzie standing there, beautiful in a tailored coat, her smile bright enough to light up the dreary November day. "Mom!" she exclaimed, wrapping Cordelia in a tight embrace that smelled of expensive perfume. "I've missed you so much." Tears pricked Cordelia's eyes as she held her daughter close. "Oh, Lizzie, so good to see you." They spent the next hour catching up, Lizzie telling animated stories about her work in London, while Larissa moved efficiently around them, putting final touches on the Thanksgiving meal. Cordelia noticed how Lizzie's gaze occasionally followed Larissa with a slight frown, but dismissed it as jet lag. Finally, they sat down to eat, the table laden with turkey, stuffing, cranberry sauce, and all the traditional fixings. Larissa had outdone herself, though Cordelia couldn't help wondering how much it had all cost. As they began to eat, Lizzie raised her glass in a toast. "To family," she said, her eyes shining, "and to finally being able to see you enjoying the comfort you deserve, Mom." Cordelia smiled, puzzled by her choice of words, but touched nonetheless. They ate and talked, and for a while, everything felt perfect. Then, as Larissa served dessert, a pumpkin pie that looked straight out of a magazine, Lizzie asked the question that would change everything. "So, Mom," she said casually, "how are the tenants working out in the house? Nice people, I hope." Cordelia looked at her blankly, fork poised midair. "What tenants, dear? What house?" Lizzie laughed, though something in her expression shifted. "The house I bought for you last year, Mom. The one on Maple Street? The rental income was supposed to supplement your pension. Please tell me you're joking." A cold feeling spread through Cordelia's chest. "Lizzie, I don't know what you're talking about. This is the only house I have." She gestured around at her modest living room with its second-hand furniture and faded curtains. Lizzie's smile faltered. "Mom, stop it. This isn't funny. I bought you a house last year when property values dropped. Remember? When I was in Singapore for that merger? I had the papers sent to you. Larissa handled everything since I couldn't be here." Cordelia's eyes darted to Larissa, who had gone completely still, the coffee pot frozen in her hands. The color had drained from her face, leaving her ashen beneath her carefully applied makeup. "Larissa?" Lizzie's voice had hardened. "Would you care to explain why my mother doesn't seem to know about the house I purchased for her over a year ago? The one you told me she was so thrilled about?" In that moment, as Larissa's eyes widened with unmistakable guilt, Cordelia felt her world begin to crumble. The financial struggles, the missing money, the constant statements and bills that Larissa managed for her. Suddenly, it all made terrible sense. There must be some misunderstanding," Larissa stammered, setting down the coffee pot with a clatter. "Cordelia, you remember. The papers came, and you signed them. Don't you remember?" Her voice had taken on a desperate quality, pleading, but Cordelia remembered no such thing. As she looked into the face of the woman she'd trusted with every aspect of her life, she saw a stranger, calculating, cold, and now cornered. The turkey dinner sat heavily in her stomach as the bitter truth began to dawn on her. She had been betrayed in the most fundamental way. Lizzie stood slowly, her napkin falling to the floor. "Mother, where are the financial documents I've been sending you? The monthly statements from the property management company? The extra funds I've been wiring?" Cordelia could only shake her head, confusion and horror mounting as she realized the extent of what had happened. "I never received any of that, Lizzie. I've been struggling to pay for my medication, cutting pills in half to make them last longer." The silence that followed was deafening. Larissa's breathing had become shallow, her eyes darting between them like a trapped animal's. And in that silence, the full magnitude of her betrayal began to take shape, a shadow looming larger with each passing second of that fateful Thanksgiving day. Larissa's face had turned the color of chalk as she backed away from the table, bumping into the counter behind her. A coffee cup teetered and fell, shattering on the kitchen floor. Nobody moved to clean it up. "I can explain," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the steady tick of the old wall clock that had belonged to Cordelia's mother. "It's not what you think." "Then what is it exactly?" Lizzie's tone was ice cold as she pulled out her phone. Her fingers flew across the screen before she turned it toward her mother. "Is this the house you've never seen, Mom?" Cordelia gasped. On the screen was a beautiful two-story home with a wraparound porch and a manicured lawn. It looked like something from a real estate magazine, a far cry from her modest dwelling with its peeling paint and sagging steps. "I bought this for you 14 months ago," Lizzie continued, her voice rising with each word. 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, completely renovated, in a nice neighborhood with other seniors. Close to the park you like. I've been paying Larissa extra to drive you there once a week to collect rent checks from the tenants." "Are you telling me you've never even seen this house?" Cordelia felt lightheaded, the room spinning slightly as the implications began to sink in. "No, Lizzie, I've never seen that house before in my life." "Teet." The silence that followed was broken only by Larissa's ragged breathing. She had backed all the way to the kitchen door now, her hand fumbling behind her for the knob. "Don't you dare," Lizzie said, her voice dangerously quiet. "Don't you dare try to leave." Larissa froze, her eyes darting between mother and daughter like a cornered animal. "You don't understand. I was going to pay it all back. I just needed the money temporarily for my son's medical treatments." "What son?" Cordelia interrupted, finding her voice at last. "You told me you didn't have any children." Larissa's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for water. The lie had slipped out so easily, so automatically, that it was clear to everyone in the room that it was just one of many. Lizzie was already dialing her phone. "I'm calling the police." "No!" Larissa lunged forward, reaching for the phone. "Please, you can't! I'll lose everything!" "You'll lose everything?" Cordelia's voice trembled, with a mixture of hurt and rage that surprised even her. "What about what I've lost? What about the house I never knew I had? What about the money that could have paid for my medications, for heat in the winter, for food that wasn't past its expiration date?" Memories flooded Cordelia's mind. Sitting in the cold because she couldn't afford to run the heater, cutting her heart pills in half despite the doctor's warnings, eating canned soup 3 nights in a row while Larissa drove away in her expensive car. All while a house, her house, generated income she never saw. "How much?" Lizzie asked quietly, her finger hovering over the call button. "How much have you stolen from my mother?" Larissa's shoulders slumped in defeat. "I don't know exactly. The rental income was $2,000 a month. Then there were the wire transfers you sent. $50,000, Lizzie said, her voice flat. "I've sent $50,000 over the past 3 years for Mom's extra expenses, plus the house, which cost $350,000, plus the rental income." She did the mental calculation, her face hardening with each passing second. "You've stolen over $400,000. Cordelia felt her knees weaken, and she sank back into her chair. $400,000. The number was incomprehensible. With that money, she could have lived comfortably for the rest of her life. No more cutting pills, no more freezing winters, no more endless worrying about every penny. "How?" she whispered, looking at the woman she had trusted implicitly. "How did you do it?" Lizzie answered before Larissa could. "Power of attorney, I'm guessing. Am I right?" Her eyes bored into Larissa, who nodded almost imperceptibly. "You were sick last winter," Larissa said to Cordelia, her voice barely audible. "With pneumonia. You signed several documents while you were on those strong medications. One of them gave me power of attorney." Cordelia remembered the illness. She'd been bedridden for weeks, feverish and confused. Larissa had been there every day, bringing papers for her to sign. Insurance forms, she'd said, medical authorizations, prescription approvals. "The house," Lizzie pressed on. "How did you manage that?" I intercepted the papers when they arrived, created a fake signature. The lawyer never met Cordelia in person because you were handling everything from Singapore. You sent me the money for the down payment, and Larissa trailed off, unable to finish. "And you what? Kept it? Bought yourself that new car I noticed in the driveway? Those designer clothes? That diamond bracelet you're wearing right now?" Lizzie's voice rose with each question, her finger still hovering over the call button. "I needed the money," Larissa insisted, a note of desperation entering her voice. "My husband left me with nothing. I have debts. I was going to pay it all back, I swear." "With what?" Lizzie challenged. "Were you planning to win the lottery? Or were you just going to keep stealing from an elderly woman on a fixed income until she died?" The words hung in the air like a physical presence. Cordelia felt a chill run down her spine as she realized the full implications. How long had Larissa planned to continue this charade? 1 more year? 5? Until Cordelia passed away and could no longer contradict her? "I trusted you," Cordelia said, her voice breaking. "I let you into my home, gave you access to everything. I defended you to my friends when they said I was paying you too much. Her voice caught on a sob. "I even told Lizzie last month how lucky I was to have you in my life." Larissa's face crumpled, a tear sliding down her cheek. Whether it was genuine remorse or merely the distress of being caught, Cordelia couldn't tell anymore. Everything she thought she knew about this woman had been a lie. "I'm calling the police now," Lizzie said firmly, pressing the call button before Larissa could protest further. "Hello? Yes, I need to report a major fraud and elder abuse case." While Lizzie spoke to the emergency operator, providing details and their address, Cordelia stared at her hands folded in her lap. They were gnarled with arthritis, the skin thin and spotted with age. Hands that had worked hard all her life, scrubbing floors as a janitor, typing reports as a secretary before that, changing diapers and cooking meals as a young mother. Honest hands. Hands that had never taken what wasn't rightfully hers. How could Larissa have looked at her, an elderly woman struggling to make ends meet, and systematically stolen everything her daughter had tried to give her? Lizzie ended the call and sat beside her mother, taking those weathered hands in her own smooth ones. "The police are on their way. They're sending a detective who specializes in elder fraud cases." "What happens now?" Cordelia asked quietly. "Now we get everything back," Lizzie said with determination. "The house, the rental income, every penny she stole. And she goes to jail." Larissa had sunk to the floor, her back against the kitchen cabinets, all pretense of innocence gone. "Please," she whispered, "my reputation, my life will be ruined." "You should have thought of that before you decided to steal from my mother," Lizzie replied coldly. The wail of approaching sirens cut through the tension in the room. Moments later, there was a knock at the door. Lizzie rose to answer it, leaving Cordelia alone with the woman who had betrayed her so completely. "Why?" Cordelia asked simply, needing to understand before the police took Larissa away. "I was kind to you. I baked you cookies on your birthday. I knitted you a scarf last Christmas. Why would you do this to me?" Larissa couldn't meet her eyes. "It was easy," she whispered. "You trusted me so completely. And the money, it was so much money." The simplicity of the answer was perhaps the most painful part. Not desperation, not a sick child or dying parent. Just greed and opportunity, combined with the vulnerability of an elderly woman who trusted too easily. The police entered, 2 uniformed officers and a plainclothes detective, who introduced himself as Detective Quentin Frost. He was an older man with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor that immediately put Cordelia at ease. "Mrs. Harlow, I'm Detective Frost. I understand you've been the victim of fraud and theft." Cordelia nodded, her throat tight with unshed tears. "Yes, I suppose I have." "It's more than theft," Lizzie interjected fiercely. "It's elder abuse. She took advantage of my mother's trust and stole hundreds of thousands of dollars over several years." Detective Frost nodded gravely, turning his attention to Larissa, who remained huddled on the kitchen floor. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to come with us. You have the right to remain silent." He continued reading her rights as one of the uniformed officers helped Larissa to her feet and placed handcuffs on her wrists. Cordelia couldn't watch as they led Larissa away. Instead, she stared out the window at the autumn leaves swirling in the November wind, trying to process how her life had changed so dramatically in the space of a single Thanksgiving meal. When the police had gone, taking Larissa with them for questioning, Lizzie sat beside her mother again and pulled her into a tight embrace. "I'm so sorry, Mom. I should have been more careful. I should have checked on things personally instead of trusting her." Cordelia returned the hug, drawing comfort from her daughter's presence. "You couldn't have known. I didn't know, and I saw her 3 times a week for 3 years. But I'm your daughter. I should have protected you better." Lizzie's voice broke with emotion. "All this time I thought I was taking care of you from afar, making your retirement comfortable. Instead, I was just funding her lifestyle while you suffered." "You did try to take care of me," Cordelia assured her, patting her daughter's hand. "It's not your fault that Larissa intercepted everything. You meant well." They sat in silence for a moment, the remnants of their interrupted Thanksgiving dinner spread across the table before them. The turkey had gone cold, the gravy congealed in its boat. Somehow, it seemed a fitting metaphor for the day's events. What should have been warm and comforting had turned cold and unpalatable. "What happens next?" Cordelia finally asked, echoing her earlier question. Lizzie straightened, wiping away a tear. "First, we get you a new bank account, one that only you and I have access to. Then, we go see that house of yours. It's legally yours. All the paperwork is in your name, even if Larissa forged your signature. The police will freeze her assets, and we'll work with them to recover as much of the stolen money as possible. Do you think we can get it all back?" "I don't know," Lizzie admitted, "but we'll get back what we can. And in the meantime, you don't need to worry about money anymore. I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere until we sort this all out. But your job in London can wait," Lizzie said firmly. "I have vacation days saved up, and my boss will understand. Family comes first." For the first time since the terrible revelation, Cordelia felt a glimmer of hope. Yes, she had been betrayed by someone she trusted, but she wasn't alone. She had Lizzie, her brilliant, determined daughter who wouldn't rest until justice was served. "Tomorrow," Lizzie continued, "we'll meet with Detective Frost again. He'll want to take your statement officially, and then we'll need to talk to a lawyer about recovering your assets and possibly filing a civil suit against Larissa in addition to the criminal charges." The thought of police statements and lawyers was overwhelming, but Cordelia nodded. "One day at a time," she said, summoning the resilience that had carried her through widowhood, raising a child alone, and decades of hard work. "One day at a time," Lizzie agreed, squeezing her mother's hand. "Starting with tonight, let's reheat some of this food and try to salvage what's left of Thanksgiving. We still have things to be thankful for, after all." Cordelia looked at her daughter's determined face and felt a rush of love and gratitude. "Yes," There were still things to be thankful for. Most importantly, the truth had been revealed before it was too late. The road ahead would be difficult, with police investigations and legal proceedings, but at least now she knew why she had been struggling so desperately, despite Lizzie's supposed generosity. As they cleaned up the interrupted meal together, Cordelia wondered about the house, her house, that she had never seen. Tomorrow, Lizzie would take her there. Tomorrow, she would begin the process of reclaiming what was rightfully hers. Tomorrow, the healing would begin. But tonight, she would simply be thankful for the truth, painful though it was, because the truth, no matter how harsh, was preferable to the sweetest lie. The following morning dawned gray and cold, matching Cordelia's somber mood as she and Lizzie prepared to meet with Detective Frost. She had barely slept, her mind replaying the previous day's revelations in an endless loop. How many times had Larissa sat at her kitchen table, drinking tea and discussing Cordelia's finances with false concern? How many times had she pretended to call the pharmacy about medication that was too expensive this month, while pocketing the money Lizzie had sent specifically for that purpose? "Ready, Mom?" Lizzie appeared in the doorway of Cordelia's small bedroom, already dressed in a smart pantsuit that made her look both professional and formidable. In the harsh morning light, Cordelia noticed the dark circles under her daughter's eyes and realized she wasn't the only one who had spent a sleepless night. "As ready as I'll ever be," Cordelia replied, smoothing down the front of her best blouse, a pale blue cotton thing that had seen better days. She felt a pang of embarrassment at her limited wardrobe, especially next to Lizzie's polished appearance. If all that money had actually reached her as intended, she would have had nicer clothes, a better home, more comfort in her golden years. Lizzie seemed to read her thoughts. "We're going shopping after the police station. You need a whole new wardrobe." "Lizzie, we don't need to." "Yes, we do," her daughter interrupted firmly. "I've been sending you clothing allowances for 3 years. You should have closets full of nice things. Instead," she gestured at the small dresser with its peeling veneer, visibly distressed at her mother's modest circumstances. The police station was busier than Cordelia had expected, even the day after Thanksgiving. Detective Frost met them in the lobby, his face grave but kind, as he ushered them into a small interview room with uncomfortable plastic chairs and fluorescent lighting that made everyone look sickly. "Mrs. Harlow, Ms. Harlow, thank you for coming in," he began, setting a recorder on the table between them. "I'd like to take your formal statements regarding the fraud perpetrated by Larissa Vex, but first, I should update you on the situation." He cleared his throat, consulting his notes. "Ms. Vex was questioned extensively last night. Initially, she maintained that there had been a misunderstanding, but when confronted with the evidence your daughter provided, bank transfers, property records, and your clear statement that you knew nothing about the house, she eventually confessed." "Did she say anything about where the money went?" Lizzie asked, leaning forward intently. Detective Frost's expression grew more serious. "I'm afraid the news isn't good on that front. Ms. Vex has spent a significant portion of the stolen funds. The new car in her driveway, designer clothing, expensive jewelry, luxury vacations. She's been living quite extravagantly on your mother's money." Cordelia felt sick. While she had been rationing her heart medication and worrying about the heating bill, Larissa had been taking vacations and buying jewelry with money meant for her care. "What about the house?" she asked quietly. "Is it really mine?" "Yes, Mrs. Harlow. The house was purchased in your name, albeit with a forged signature on the final documents. Legally, it belongs to you. Ms. Vex had been collecting rent from the tenants, a young family of 4, and keeping that money as well. Approximately $2,000 a month for the past 14 months. Lizzie's hand tightened around her mother's. "And my wire transfers? The monthly payments I've been sending? Those were being deposited into an account that Ms. Vex controlled. She had set up a sophisticated system, Using the power of attorney document your mother signed while ill to establish accounts in her name, but under Ms. Vex's control. Classic elder financial abuse. Unfortunately all too common, though rarely on this scale. Detective Frost slid a folder across the table. These are copies of the bank records we've subpoenaed. They show regular deposits from Ms. Harlow's London bank, followed by transfers to Ms. Vex's personal accounts. She was quite methodical. Cordelia stared at the papers, the columns of numbers swimming before her eyes. Each figure represented something she had been denied: comfort, security, dignity in her later years. Her hands trembled as she pushed the documents back toward the detective. "I can't look at these right now," she whispered. "I understand," Detective Frost said gently. "It's overwhelming. The good news is that we've frozen all of Ms. Vex's accounts. Any remaining funds will be recovered and returned to you. And the house, as I mentioned, is legally yours to keep or sell as you see fit." "The tenants," Cordelia said suddenly. "The family living there. What happens to them?" "That's entirely up to you, Mrs. Harlow. They've been paying their rent faithfully, unaware of the situation. They're innocent parties in this." Cordelia nodded, relieved. She wouldn't want another family to suffer because of Larissa's actions. "Now," Detective Frost continued, "I need to take your formal statements. Mrs. Harlow, could you please tell me, in your own words, about your relationship with Larissa Vex, and when you first became aware of the fraud?" For the next hour, Cordelia recounted everything. How Larissa had come into her life 3 years ago, gradually taking over her finances, intercepting her mail, managing her bills, and apparently stealing everything of value along the way. She described the shock of yesterday's revelation, the gradual realization that her struggling circumstances had been entirely manufactured by the woman she trusted. Lizzie then gave her statement, explaining how she had arranged for the house purchase, the regular wire transfers, the additional funds for health care and comfort, all supposedly being managed by Larissa while she worked abroad. "I should have been more diligent," Lizzie said, her voice thick with self-recrimination. "I should have called the tenants directly, checked the bank records more carefully, visited more often. I trusted her, because Mom trusted her." "This is not your fault, Ms. Harlow," Detective Frost assured her. "Ms. Vex was very convincing, and had worked hard to earn your mother's complete trust. She exploited that relationship skillfully. The prosecution will be seeking maximum penalties, given the amount stolen and the vulnerable status of the victim." "Will I have to testify?" Cordelia asked, suddenly anxious at the thought of facing Larissa in court. "Most likely, yes, but we'll do everything we can to make that process as painless as possible. And with the confession we've already obtained, there's a good chance Ms. Vex will accept a plea deal rather than face a jury." After finishing their statements and signing the necessary documents, Cordelia and Lizzie left the police station, emotionally drained, but with a clearer understanding of what had happened and what would come next. "I think we should go see the house now," Lizzie suggested as they got into her rental car. "Are you up for it?" Cordelia nodded, curiosity overcoming her exhaustion. After all this time, she wanted to see the home that was legally hers, the property that could have changed her financial situation so dramatically had she known about it. They drove through town, passing the familiar neighborhoods of Cordelia's daily life before turning into an area she rarely visited. A newer development, with tree-lined streets and well-maintained homes. Lizzie slowed the car as they approached a tidy 2-story house with dark blue siding and white trim. A wraparound porch graced the front, complete with a porch swing gently moving in the breeze. "This is it," Lizzie said quietly, pulling into the driveway. "This is your house, Mom." Cordelia stared at the property in disbelief. It was beautiful. Exactly the sort of home she would have chosen for herself, if given the opportunity. Large enough to be comfortable, but not ostentatious, with obvious care put into the landscaping and maintenance. "Do the tenants know we're coming?" she asked, suddenly nervous about intruding. I called them this morning while you were getting ready. They know there's been a change in the property management and that we'd be stopping by. They're understandably confused, but I assured them their lease is secure for now. A young woman opened the door before they could even knock. A toddler balanced on her hip and a curious expression on her face. "Mrs. Harlow?" she asked uncertainly, looking between Cordelia and Lizzie. "Yes, I'm Cordelia Harlow. This is my daughter, Lizzie." The woman's brow furrowed in confusion. "But I thought Mrs. Harlow was the older lady who stops by once a month to collect the rent. Larissa, I think?" Lizzie stepped forward, her voice gentle but firm. "I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding. My mother is the actual owner of this house. Larissa Vex was acting as a property manager, but she was misrepresenting herself. She had no authority to collect your rent." The young woman's eyes widened. "Oh my goodness. We had no idea. We've been paying her in cash each month, just like she asked. Is everything okay with our lease? We love this house, and our kids are settled in the neighborhood school." "Everything is fine," Cordelia interrupted, seeing the woman's growing distress. "Your lease is valid, and we have no intention of disrupting your family. We just wanted to see the property and introduce ourselves properly." Relief washed over the young mother's face. "Oh, thank you. I'm Emily Carter. This is my son, Max." She bounced the toddler, who regarded the visitors with solemn eyes. "My husband, Jason, is at work, and our daughter is at a friend's house. Would you like to come in? I can show you around if you'd like." Cordelia hesitated, not wanting to impose, but Lizzie nodded encouragingly. "If you wouldn't mind, that would be lovely." Emily stepped back, inviting them into what was legally Cordelia's home, but felt like entering a stranger's space. The interior was warm and inviting, hardwood floors, an open-concept living area, modern kitchen with granite countertops. Family photos adorned the walls, children's toys were neatly organized in colorful bins, and the scent of cinnamon and apples lingered in the air. "I was just baking," Emily explained, noting Cordelia's appreciative sniff. "Day after Thanksgiving tradition in our family. Apple pie to use up the leftover ice cream." She laughed, then sobered quickly. "I hope it's okay that we've made some minor changes, painted the bedrooms, put up shelves in the garage. Larissa said it was fine as long as we maintained everything properly." "It's absolutely fine," Cordelia assured her, moving slowly through the space that could have been her home for the past year. It was everything she would have wanted. Single-level living with a spare bedroom for when Lizzie visited, a sunny kitchen with ample counter space for baking, a small garden visible through the back windows where she could have grown herbs and flowers. As Emily showed them around, explaining the updates they'd made and how much they loved living there, Cordelia felt a strange mixture of emotions: anger at what had been stolen from her, gratitude that the house had at least been well cared for, and an odd sense of detachment. This beautiful home was technically hers, but it had never been her home. "The neighborhood is wonderful," Emily was saying as they completed the tour in the backyard. "Mostly older couples and young families. There's a community garden at the end of the street, and the neighbors organize block parties for major holidays. Everyone's been so welcoming." Lizzie watched her mother's face carefully. "What do you think, Mom?" Cordelia took a deep breath, looking around the yard where a small playset stood waiting for children's laughter. "I think it's perfect, and I think the right family is already living here." Back in the car, after saying goodbye to Emily with promises to be in touch about future rent arrangements, Lizzie turned to her mother with a questioning look. "You don't want to move in? It would be so much nicer than your current place." Cordelia shook her head slowly. "That young family has made it their home. The children are settled. They've put their mark on the place. It would feel wrong to displace them." She smiled softly. "Besides, the rental income will make a world of difference to my circumstances. I can stay where I am, make some much-needed improvements, and never worry about medication costs or heating bills again." Lizzie reached across to squeeze her mother's hand. "You're an extraordinary woman. You know that? After everything that's happened, Your first concern is for that family's well-being. They're innocent in all this, Cordelia said simply. Like us. They were deceived by Larissa. And I've lived in my little house for 15 years. It's not fancy, but it's home. As they drove back through town, Cordelia's mind was already working on the practical implications of her new financial reality. With the rental income from the house, she could fix the leaking roof, replace the ancient furnace, perhaps even hire a legitimate part-time helper for the heavier household chores that had become difficult with her arthritis. We need to set up proper management for the property, Lizzie was saying, always the practical one. A reputable company with transparent accounting. And we'll need to establish a new bank account for you, one that only you control, with me as a backup signatory in case of emergencies. Cordelia listened, grateful for her daughter's expertise, but also feeling a renewed sense of independence. For too long, she had surrendered control of her finances to Larissa, believing herself incapable of managing on her own. That would change now. I want to learn, she said suddenly, interrupting Lizzie's planning, about online banking, financial management, all of it. I don't want to be vulnerable like that ever again. Lizzie looked surprised, then pleased. Of course. We can set everything up on a tablet, something easy to use with large text. I'll show you how to check your accounts, pay bills online, monitor the property management company's reports. You'll have complete visibility. For the first time since the devastating revelations of Thanksgiving Day, Cordelia felt a spark of excitement about the future. Yes, she had been betrayed, and yes, much had been stolen that could never be recovered. But she had also been given a second chance at financial security, and, perhaps more importantly, at reclaiming her independence. As they pulled into the driveway of her modest home, the one she had decided to keep despite now owning a much nicer property, Cordelia felt oddly at peace. Tomorrow would bring more discussions with lawyers, more paperwork, more decisions about how to proceed against Larissa. But today, she had seen her house, met her tenants, and taken the first steps toward reclaiming her life. You know, she said, as Lizzie helped her from the car, something good has come from all this after all. What's that? Lizzie asked, pausing with her hand on the front door. Cordelia smiled, the lines around her eyes crinkling with genuine warmth. You're here, and you're staying for a while. I've missed you more than you know. Lizzie's eyes filled with tears as she embraced her mother on the worn front steps of the little house. I've missed you too, Mom, and I promise I'm not going anywhere until everything is sorted out. Maybe not even then. Together, they entered the house that had been the setting for such shocking revelations just one day before. But now, with the truth exposed and the healing process beginning, it felt like they were crossing a threshold into a new chapter. One where deception would be replaced with honesty, struggle with security, and distance with newfound closeness. 3 weeks had passed since that fateful Thanksgiving Day. The modest living room of Cordelia's house now served as an impromptu command center, with folders of documents spread across the coffee table and a new laptop, a gift from Lizzie, open on the side table. Detective Frost had become a regular visitor, bringing updates on the investigation and guiding Cordelia through the complexities of the legal proceedings against Larissa. The district attorney is pushing for the maximum sentence, he explained during his latest visit, accepting the cup of tea Cordelia offered. Financial elder abuse of this magnitude, with the additional charges of forgery, identity theft, and mail fraud, he's looking at significant prison time. Cordelia nodded, settling into her armchair. The past weeks had brought a strange mixture of emotions: anger at the betrayal, relief at understanding why she had struggled so desperately despite Lizzie's supposed help, and a growing sense of empowerment as she began to reclaim control of her life. "Have they found any more of the money?" Lizzie asked, joining them with her own cup of tea. She had extended her stay indefinitely, working remotely from her mother's dining room table and negotiating with her London office for a transfer to the company's branch in a nearby city. Detective Frost's expression turned grim. I'm afraid Ms. Vex spent most of it. The forensic accountants have traced approximately $30,000 in recoverable assets, funds still in her accounts, jewelry that can be sold, the car which is only partially paid off. The rest, he spread his hands in a gesture of futility. Gone, Cordelia finished for him. Spent on vacations and designer clothes and whatever else she bought while I was cutting my pills in half. The bitterness in her voice surprised even her. Cordelia had always prided herself on forgiveness, on finding the good in others. But the methodical way Larissa had exploited her, knowing her circumstances, watching her struggle while stealing the very resources meant to help her, it was a betrayal too profound for easy forgiveness. The good news, Detective Frost continued, is that the house is unquestionably yours. The rental income from the Carters is now being properly deposited into your new account, and the property management company Lizzie found seems to be handling everything professionally. They're good people, the Carters, Cordelia said, her expression softening. She had met with the family several times since discovering the house, each visit cementing her decision to let them remain as tenants. Their 2 children had grown attached to her, calling her Grandma Cordelia, and presenting her with hand-drawn pictures that now adorned her refrigerator. They sent over dinner again last night, Lizzie added with a smile. Emily's determined to fatten Mom up. She says she's too thin. This was true. Since learning the full extent of Larissa's deception, Cordelia had been examining old photographs and realized how much weight she had lost over the past 3 years. Not from illness, but from quietly going without when money was tight. Proper nutrition had been one of many necessities sacrificed while Larissa diverted funds meant for her care. Well, their rent check cleared yesterday, Detective Frost noted, checking his notes. $2,000, deposited directly to your account. That should help with the home improvements you mentioned. Cordelia nodded, glancing around her small living room with its worn furniture and faded curtains. Already, changes were visible. A new furnace had been installed the previous week, ending years of unreliable heating. The roof had been repaired, eliminating the persistent leak in the upstairs bathroom. Next on the list were new windows to replace the drafty ones that had made winters so miserable. I still can't believe I own a house that nice, she said, shaking her head. Every time I visit, it feels like I'm walking through a dream. It's rightfully yours, Lizzie reminded her firmly. Bought and paid for with my money, intended for your comfort all along. The doorbell rang, interrupting their conversation. Lizzie rose to answer it, returning moments later with a young woman in a crisp business suit. Mom, this is Melanie from the bank. She's here to go over the new accounts with you, like we discussed. Cordelia straightened, smoothing her hair self-consciously. These days, she found herself hosting a parade of professionals, police officers, lawyers, financial advisors, contractors. It was overwhelming at times, but also oddly affirming. After years of being dismissed and marginalized by Larissa, who had positioned herself as the expert managing Cordelia's supposedly limited resources, it felt validating to be treated as a competent adult capable of making her own decisions. I'll leave you to it, Detective Frost said, rising and gathering his notes. I'll be in touch next week. The grand jury is hearing evidence on Tuesday, and I expect they'll return an indictment. Then we'll have a better timeline for the trial, assuming Ms. Vex doesn't accept the plea deal the DA is offering. After the detective left, Melanie sat beside Cordelia and opened her portfolio. I've brought everything we discussed, Mrs. Harlow. The new checking account with your name only, a savings account for the rental income, and the automatic payment setups for your utilities and medication prescriptions. I also have information about the seniors' financial literacy workshop you expressed interest in. Cordelia felt a flutter of anticipation. The workshop had been her idea, a way to not only improve her own financial knowledge, but perhaps help other seniors avoid situations like hers. The local bank had been enthusiastic, offering to host monthly sessions covering topics from avoiding scams to basic online banking. I'd still like to speak at the first session, she confirmed. If my story can help even one person avoid what happened to me, it will be worth it." Melanie nodded approvingly. "Your perspective will be invaluable. So many seniors are vulnerable to these types of schemes precisely because they don't discuss them openly. There's so much shame associated with being deceived." "I felt that shame," Cordelia admitted. "Even after we discovered what Larissa had done, part of me kept thinking, how could I have been so foolish, so blind? I invited her into every aspect of my life, handed over my mail, my bills, my medications, everything. She was a professional con artist," Lizzie interjected fiercely from the doorway. "She targeted you specifically because Larissa knew you were too trusting and that I sent you money regularly. That's not foolishness, Mom. That's just being a good person who couldn't imagine someone being so deliberately cruel." The bank representative nodded in agreement. "Your daughter is right, Mrs. Harlow. The psychological manipulation in these cases is extremely sophisticated. Perpetrators like Ms. Vex spend months or even years building trust before they begin the actual theft." As Melanie walked Cordelia through her new accounts, explaining the security features and showing her how to monitor activity from the laptop Lizzie had set up, Cordelia felt a growing sense of confidence. The banking app was simpler than she had feared, designed with large text and intuitive features that even her arthritic fingers could manage easily. "And here's your new debit card," Melanie concluded, handing over a plastic card emblazoned with Cordelia's name. "The PIN is the one you selected during our last meeting. Remember, don't share it with anyone, not even family members unless you've designated them as authorized users on the account." Cordelia took the card reverently. Such a small thing, yet it represented a profound shift in her circumstances. For 3 years, Larissa had controlled every penny, doling out meager allowances from what should have been Cordelia's comfortable retirement fund. Now, financial independence was literally in her hands. After Melanie left, promising to check in again after the workshop, Cordelia sat quietly with her new debit card and the folder of account information. Lizzie watched her from the kitchen doorway, a question in her eyes. "What are you thinking, Mom?" Cordelia looked up with a small smile. "I'm thinking about all the things I've denied myself these past few years, believing I couldn't afford them. Proper heating, the full dose of my medications, fresh fruit that isn't discounted because it's about to spoil." She paused, her voice growing softer. "And I'm thinking about all the things I couldn't give you when you were growing up. Music lessons, summer camps, the prom dress you really wanted instead of the one from the thrift store." Lizzie crossed the room and knelt beside her mother's chair, taking her hands. "Mom, you gave me everything I needed, everything important. You worked 2 jobs to keep a roof over our heads after Dad died. You never missed a school concert or a parent-teacher conference. You taught me the value of hard work and education. That's why I've been successful." Tears welled in Cordelia's eyes. "I just wish I could have given you more." "You gave me values," Lizzie insisted. "Integrity, compassion, persistence. Those things matter more than fancy clothes or expensive camps." She squeezed her mother's hands. "And look at me now, able to buy you a house, set up your retirement. That's because of you, Mom, because of the foundation you built." The ringing of Lizzie's cell phone interrupted the emotional moment. She glanced at the screen and frowned. "It's London. I need to take this. It might be about the transfer." As Lizzie disappeared into the kitchen with her phone, Cordelia wiped her eyes and turned her attention back to the banking information. She was determined to master these systems, to never again be vulnerable to someone like Larissa. The next phase of her life would be different, empowered, informed, and secure. When Lizzie returned, her expression was troubled. "Everything okay?" Cordelia asked, instantly concerned. "Yes and no," Lizzie replied, sitting on the arm of her mother's chair. "That was my boss. The American branch can only offer me a position at a significant pay cut. They claim it's because the department here is smaller, with fewer responsibilities." "Oh, Lizzie," Cordelia sighed, You can't take a pay cut because of me. Your career in London is important. You're more important, Lizzie said firmly. After everything that's happened, I can't bear the thought of being thousands of miles away again, relying on strangers to look after you. I'm not an invalid, Cordelia reminded her gently. And we've put safeguards in place now. The new accounts, the property management company, regular check-ins with neighbors. I'll be fine. But I won't be, Lizzie admitted, her voice breaking slightly. I won't be fine knowing I left you again. Every time I called and Larissa told me you were resting or out with friends, I believed her. I never insisted on speaking to you directly. I never asked the hard questions about where the money was going. I failed you, Mom. You did not fail me, Cordelia said firmly, reaching for her daughter's hand. You were building your career, just like I always wanted you to. You sent money faithfully. You bought me a house, for heaven's sake. It's not your fault that Larissa intercepted everything. Lizzie shook her head stubbornly. I should have known. I should have checked more carefully. And I should have questioned why my bills were always mysteriously higher than expected, or why the heat had to be kept so low to save money when you were supposedly sending plenty, Cordelia countered. We could second-guess ourselves forever, but the only person truly at fault is Larissa. She's the criminal here, not you. They sat in silence for a moment, the afternoon sun casting long shadows across the living room floor. Finally, Lizzie spoke, her voice thoughtful. What if there's a third option? Something besides me taking a pay cut or moving back to London? Cordelia raised an eyebrow questioningly. What if you came to London with me? Just for a while? Lizzie hurried on, seeing her mother's startled expression. 6 months, maybe a year. You could sublet this house, continue collecting rent from the Carters, and have an adventure abroad, while the legal proceedings against Larissa continue. Me? In London? Cordelia couldn't hide her astonishment at the suggestion. Lizzie, I've never even been out of the country. I don't have a passport. I wouldn't know how to navigate a big foreign city at my age. You'd be with me, Lizzie pressed. I have a guest room that's just sitting empty. The healthcare is excellent. There are wonderful parks, museums, theaters, all the things you've always said you'd love to see someday. Someday, Cordelia emphasized, when I was younger, maybe. But now, with my arthritis and my heart condition, especially now, Lizzie insisted. Mom, you've spent your entire life putting others first. Dad when he was sick, me growing up, your various employers. You worked hard, saved carefully, did everything right. Then Larissa came along and stole years of comfort from you. Don't let her steal your future, too. Cordelia sat back, genuinely considering the idea for the first time. London. The thought was both terrifying and exhilarating. Could she really start over at 72? Experience a new country? A new way of life? It's a big decision, she said finally. I'd need to think about it. Lizzie nodded, but her eyes were bright with hope. Of course. Take all the time you need. I want you to have experiences, Mom. Adventures. Stories to tell. Not just existence, but life. That night, after Lizzie had gone to bed, Cordelia sat alone in her living room, looking at the familiar walls that had witnessed both her struggles and this recent upheaval. On the coffee table lay her new debit card, her banking information, and, added to the pile just that evening, a passport application that Lizzie had printed out just in case. London. The word hung in her mind like a glittering possibility. Not just a city, but a symbol of all the things she had never allowed herself to want, believing they were out of reach. Now, with the rental income from her second house providing security, and Lizzie's invitation opening doors, perhaps those horizons weren't so distant after all. You don't get to take this from me too, Larissa, Cordelia whispered to the empty room, reaching for the passport application with newfound determination. Whatever she decided, the choice would be hers alone. Not limited by the artificial constraints of a thief who had nearly stolen her future along with her money. For the first time in years, Cordelia fell asleep thinking not of bills or medications or financial worries, but of possibilities. Red double-decker buses, the Thames River, Westminster Abbey, and most importantly, mornings with her daughter, evenings sharing stories, rebuilding the relationship that distance and deception had strained but never broken. 6 months later, Cordelia stood at the window of Lizzie's London apartment, watching the soft spring rain create shimmering patterns on the glass. Below, the city stretched out in a panorama of historic buildings and modern skyscrapers, red buses navigating the wet streets, pedestrians hurrying along with colorful umbrellas blooming like flowers against the gray day. Even after half a year, the view still took her breath away. "Tea's ready, Mom," Lizzie called from the kitchen, "and you've got mail from Detective Frost." Cordelia turned from the window, her movements more fluid than they had been 6 months ago. Regular physical therapy for her arthritis, proper medication for her heart condition, and a diet rich in fresh foods had transformed her. She looked years younger, her silver hair now stylishly cut, her wardrobe completely renewed. Even her posture had changed. Shoulders back, head high, the subtle stoop that had begun to develop, now corrected through exercise and proper care. "Is it about the sentencing?" she asked, accepting the steaming mug of tea from her daughter. The trial of Larissa Vex had concluded 3 weeks earlier with a guilty verdict on all counts. Today's letter likely contained news of the final sentencing. Lizzie nodded, handing over the official envelope. "Looks like it." With steady fingers, Cordelia opened the letter and read the detective's update. 15 years, she said finally, looking up at her daughter. 15 years in federal prison. No possibility of parole for at least 10. Full restitution ordered, though Detective Frost says that's largely symbolic since she spent most of the money. "Justice," Lizzie said simply, sitting beside her mother on the comfortable sofa that faced the panoramic windows. Not perfect justice, but justice nonetheless. Cordelia set the letter aside, her expression thoughtful rather than triumphant. "You know, I expected to feel more, I don't know, vindicated, satisfied, but mostly I just feel sad. Sad that someone would throw away their life like that, hurting others for temporary luxury. That's because you have empathy, Mom, even for someone who hurt you terribly." Lizzie squeezed her mother's hand. "It's one of the many things I admire about you." The doorbell chimed, interrupting their moment of reflection. Lizzie rose to answer it, returning moments later with a bouquet of vibrant spring flowers and a small package. "Special delivery," she announced with a mysterious smile. "Happy birthday, Mom." Cordelia accepted the flowers with surprise. "My birthday isn't until next week. Consider this an early celebration." Open the package. Inside the small box, Cordelia found an envelope containing printed boarding passes and a handwritten note. Puzzled, she read aloud, "Dear Mrs. Harlow, the Carters would like to invite you to a very special housewarming. Your presence is requested at Lizzie. These are tickets to go home for tomorrow." Lizzie's smile widened. "Not just home, Mom. Read the address again." Cordelia looked more closely at the invitation. The address wasn't for her modest house, but for the property she owned, the one where the Carter family had been renting. "I don't understand. Are they moving? Did something happen?" "Nothing bad," Lizzie assured her. "Emily called last week. They've saved enough for a down payment on their own home, something they've been working toward for years. They move out at the end of the month." She paused, watching her mother process this information. "Which means decisions need to be made about your property. I suppose we could find new tenants," Cordelia mused. "The rental income has been so helpful. Or," Lizzie suggested gently, "you could finally live in the home that was always meant to be yours." Cordelia's breath caught. After discovering the house's existence, she had visited several times before coming to London, always as the landlady rather than the resident. The possibility of actually living there herself had seemed remote, something for a distant future that might never arrive. Move back permanently? But what about London? What about— He gestured vaguely at the beautiful apartment, at the life they had built together over the past 6 months. "I've been offered a position with the company's American branch," Lizzie revealed. "Not the junior role they tried to saddle me with before, but a proper executive position with a salary comparable to what I make here. I'd be based in the city, just 40 minutes from your house." "You never mentioned this," Cordelia said, stunned by the revelation. "I wanted to be sure it was right before bringing it up. The papers came through yesterday." Lizzie's expression grew earnest. "These months with you have been precious, Mom. Healing. For both of us, I think. But London was always temporary. A respite, while you recovered from what Larissa did, while we rebuilt our relationship, while the legal process played out." Cordelia set down the invitation, emotions swirling. The thought of returning to America brought mixed feelings. On one hand, London had represented freedom from the painful memories of betrayal, a fresh start when she needed it most. On the other hand, the idea of finally occupying the beautiful home that should have been hers all along, of planting a garden, joining the neighborhood activities Emily had described, being near enough to see Lizzie regularly but with independence restored, held undeniable appeal. "The timing feels significant," she said finally. "Larissa's sentencing, the Carters moving, your job offer. It's as if one chapter is truly ending and another beginning." "Exactly," Lizzie agreed. "And it's your chapter to write, Mom. Whatever you decide, I'll support it. If you want to stay in London, I'll keep my position here. If you want to return, but not to that house, we'll sell it and find you something else. This is your life, your choice. Your life, your choice." The words resonated deeply. For too long, Cordelia's choices had been constrained, first by poverty, then by Larissa's systematic theft, finally by the sheer practical complications of recovering from such profound betrayal. Now, for perhaps the first time in her adult life, true options lay before her. "I need to think," she said, rising from the sofa and moving back to the window. The rain had stopped, and weak sunshine was breaking through the clouds, gilding the wet streets with soft light. Lizzie nodded, understanding. "Take all the time you need. The tickets are flexible. We can change the dates if you're not ready." That evening, while Lizzie was out meeting colleagues for dinner, Cordelia sat alone in the apartment, the boarding passes and invitations spread before her on the coffee table. Beside them, she placed Detective Frost's letter about Larissa's sentencing, and, after a moment's hesitation, the small photo album she had brought from America. The album contained sparse documentation of her life, her wedding day, Lizzie's childhood milestones, the modest home she had maintained for decades. So few photographs for so many years of living. London had changed that. Her phone now overflowed with images. Cordelia feeding swans in Regent's Park. Cordelia and Lizzie at the Tower of London. Cordelia beaming beside a palace guard who had broken character to smile for the camera. She had lived more fully in the past 6 months than in the previous 6 years. Learned more, experienced more, laughed more. The shadow of Larissa's betrayal had gradually receded, replaced by the vibrant reality of a life reclaimed. Yet something was missing. A sense of completion, perhaps, of coming full circle. The following day, as their plane descended toward the familiar skyline of their hometown, Cordelia clutched Lizzie's hand, her stomach fluttering with nerves that had nothing to do with the landing. "Second thoughts?" Lizzie asked gently. "Not exactly," Cordelia replied. "More like anticipation. I feel like I'm about to close a loop that's been open far too long." From the airport, they drove directly to the house on Maple Street. The Carter family was waiting on the porch. Emily, her husband Jason, and their 2 children, all waving excitedly as Lizzie's rental car pulled into the driveway. "Grandma Cordelia!" the children cried, racing down the steps to greet her with enthusiastic hugs that nearly knocked her off balance. Despite having met only a handful of times before her departure for London, they had maintained a connection through video calls and the drawings they still sent regularly to Lizzie's apartment. "We made you welcome home cookies," the little girl announced proudly, "and I drew you a new picture for your fridge." "How wonderful," Cordelia replied, genuinely touched by their excitement. "I can't wait to see it." Emily embraced her next, stepping back to look at her with obvious approval. "London clearly agrees with you, Mrs. Harlow. You look amazing." "Tea, proper health care and nutrition will do that," Lizzie commented, with a pointed look at her mother, who had finally admitted how significantly her health had suffered during Larissa's reign of deception. Inside, the house looked different than Cordelia remembered. Most of the furniture was gone, leaving echoing spaces marked only by indentations in the carpet, where heavy pieces had stood. Boxes were stacked against walls, labeled in neat black marker. The process of transition was well underway. "We'll be out completely by the end of next week," Jason explained as they settled in the nearly empty living room, perching on the few remaining chairs. "The new place is just across town, closer to my work and the kids' school." "It's perfect timing, really," Emily added. "We've loved this house so much, but it always felt a little like borrowed happiness, knowing it wasn't truly ours. Now we'll have our own place, and you can finally enjoy the home your daughter bought for you." Cordelia's eyes met Lizzie's across the room, a silent communication passing between them. "Actually," she began carefully, "I haven't quite decided what I'm going to do yet." The afternoon passed pleasantly, with the children eager to show Cordelia every corner of the house as if she had never seen it before. They guided her through the backyard, pointing out the flower beds they had helped plant, the tree where birds nested each spring, the patio where summer barbecues had created cherished memories. "Mom and Dad said you might live here now," the little boy said as they stood beneath the old oak tree. "Will you swing with us, if you do?" "Dad put up that swing just last summer." "I might," Cordelia replied, watching the simple rope swing sway gently in the breeze, "if I decide to stay." Later, after saying goodbye to the Carters with promises to visit their new home once they were settled, Cordelia and Lizzie drove to Cordelia's original house. It looked smaller somehow, more worn than she remembered, though the new roof and windows Lizzie had arranged before their departure for London had improved its appearance considerably. "Strange to be back?" Lizzie asked as they carried their luggage inside. "Very," Cordelia admitted, looking around at the modest living room with its familiar furniture. Someone, likely the neighbor who had agreed to check on the place periodically, had left fresh flowers on the coffee table and stocked the refrigerator with basics. Despite these welcoming touches, the house felt like a relic from another life, a time capsule preserving memories both bitter and sweet. That night, Cordelia lay awake in her old bedroom, listening to the familiar creaks of the house settling. Down the hall, Lizzie slept in her childhood room, now repurposed as a guest space, but still bearing traces of the teenager who had once plastered its walls with posters and dreams. 2 houses, 2 possibilities, 2 versions of a future she had never expected to have the luxury of choosing between. The next morning, Cordelia rose early and drove herself to the cemetery where her husband was buried. It had been her first stop upon returning to America after each previous long absence, and this homecoming, temporary or permanent, would be no exception. The quiet paths between the headstones were damp with morning dew as she made her way to the familiar plot. Robert Harlow, beloved husband and father, gone 27 years now. She placed fresh flowers beside the headstone and sat on the small bench installed years ago with money saved penny by penny from her janitor's salary. "Well, Robert," she said softly, "I've had quite the adventure since we last talked." For an hour, she sat in the peaceful morning light, telling her husband's memory everything: Larissa's betrayal, the discovery of the house, the journey to London, and now the decision that lay before her. As always, speaking her thoughts aloud to him brought clarity. By the time she rose to leave, brushing grass from her skirt, Cordelia knew exactly what she wanted to do. That afternoon, she asked Lizzie to drive her back to the house on Maple Street. Emily was there alone, packing kitchen items into cardboard boxes. "Mrs. Harlow, what a lovely surprise. I thought you'd be resting after your long flight." "I've had enough rest," Cordelia replied with a smile. "I was hoping to see the house once more. Alone this time, if you wouldn't mind. Just to walk through the empty rooms and think." Understanding lit Emily's face. "Of course. Take all the time you need. I'll run some errands and come back in an hour or so." When Emily had gone, Cordelia moved slowly through the house, Lizzie trailing behind at a respectful distance. The bedrooms upstairs, now empty of the children's toys and family photos. The master suite, with its large windows overlooking the backyard. The kitchen where family meals had been prepared and shared. The living room where holidays had been celebrated. In each space, Cordelia paused, closed her eyes, and tried to imagine herself living there, making it her own, beginning again at 73. Finally, she returned to the backyard, standing beneath the old oak tree where the rope swing moved gently in the spring breeze. Lizzie joined her, waiting patiently for whatever decision her mother had reached. "I know what I want to do," Cordelia said at last, turning to face her daughter with clear, determined eyes. 3 months later, on a bright summer morning, Cordelia stood in the driveway of the house on Maple Street, directing movers as they unloaded furniture from a large truck. Some pieces were familiar: her husband's reading chair, the dining table where Lizzie had done her homework, cherished lamps and artwork that had followed her through decades of life. Others were new: a comfortable sofa selected during a shopping trip with Lizzie, a modern bed better suited to her aging back, bright kitchen appliances to replace the ancient ones she'd struggled with for years. "The bookshelves go in the front room," she called to the movers, pointing toward the large windows overlooking the porch. "And please be careful with that cabinet. It was my grandmother's." Lizzie emerged from the house, clipboard in hand. "The painting crew is finished upstairs. Pale blue in your bedroom, just like you wanted, and that sunny yellow in the guest room. They look fantastic." Cordelia smiled, satisfaction warming her more thoroughly than the summer sun. After much reflection, she had made her decision. Not to sell either property, but to embrace them both as symbols of her reclaimed life. Her original home was now rented to a young couple starting out, the income providing additional security for her future. And this house, the one that should have been hers all along, was finally becoming her home, transformed by her own choices, her own taste, her own vision for the next chapter. The neighborhood had welcomed her warmly. Already, she had attended 2 block parties, joined the community garden at the end of the street, and been invited to weekly card games with a group of seniors who lived nearby. The Carters visited often from their new home across town, the children still calling her Grandma Cordelia, and delighting in helping her plant flowers along the walkway. And Lizzie, her brilliant, devoted daughter, had taken the executive position just 40 minutes away, close enough for Sunday dinners and impromptu visits, but far enough to preserve the independence both women now cherished. As the day's moving activities wound down and the truck departed, Cordelia and Lizzie sat on the porch swing, watching the sunset paint the sky in dramatic oranges and pinks. "Happy?" Lizzie asked, studying her mother's peaceful expression. "More than happy," Cordelia replied thoughtfully. "Content. Whole. As if all the scattered pieces of my life have finally come together in the right pattern." She thought about the journey that had brought her here, the devastating discovery on Thanksgiving Day, the painful revelations that followed, the healing months in London, and finally, this homecoming to a place that represented not just material security, but emotional resolution. "You know what's strange?" she continued. "In a twisted way, I almost feel I should thank Larissa." Lizzie looked at her incredulously. "Thank her? After everything she did?" "Not for the theft or the lies," Cordelia clarified. "Never for those. But if she hadn't been caught, if we hadn't discovered the truth that day, I might have continued struggling in my old house, never knowing what I was missing. You might have stayed in London indefinitely, building your career, but missing out on being closer to home. We might never have had these past 9 months of healing and reconnection. She reached for her daughter's hand, holding it tightly. Sometimes the most painful revelations lead to the most beautiful transformations. That Thanksgiving was the worst day of my life, and also, in retrospect, one of the most important. Lizzie's eyes glistened with tears in the fading light. I still wish you'd never had to go through it, that you'd had this house, this security, these opportunities all along. I know, Cordelia said softly, but then I wouldn't be the person I am now, stronger, wiser, more independent than I ever thought possible at my age. She gestured toward the house behind them, windows glowing warmly as dusk settled over the neighborhood. This isn't just a house anymore, Lizzie. It's a symbol of everything I've reclaimed. My security, my autonomy, my future. From down the street came the sounds of children playing, neighbors chatting, life unfolding in its ordinary, miraculous way. Tomorrow, Cordelia would continue unpacking, arranging her belongings in this space that was finally, rightfully hers. Next week, she would host her first dinner party. The Carters, Lizzie, Detective Frost, and his wife, neighbors from both sides. The following month, she would begin volunteering at the senior center, sharing her story to help others protect themselves from similar exploitation. But tonight, in this perfect moment of completion, Cordelia simply sat with her daughter as darkness fell gently around them. Two women who had weathered a terrible storm and emerged not just intact but transformed, their bond stronger, their lives richer, their hearts more resilient than ever before. You know what this feels like? Cordelia said, as the first stars appeared in the deepening blue above them. What? Lizzie asked, her head resting comfortably on her mother's shoulder. Justice, Cordelia replied simply. Not the kind that comes from courtrooms or prison sentences, though those matter too, but the deeper justice of reclaiming what was stolen, not just money or property, but dignity, possibility, joy. As they sat together in the gathering darkness, Cordelia felt the last lingering shadows of Larissa's betrayal finally dissolve, replaced by the profound certainty that her life, her real life, on her own terms, was only just beginning. From tragedy had come triumph, from deception, truth, from loss, a bounty of unexpected gifts that no thief, no matter how clever, could ever take away again. If you enjoyed the story, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. And drop a comment below. What city are you watching from? And if your heart tells you to, feel free to leave me a tip on Buy Me a Coffee. Just check the first pinned comment. Thanks for keeping me company and for the coffee, and I'll see you in the next story.